hot spots. All right.
You're in your own galaxy, John.
In my mind, I am, yes.
We're still struggling. John was just telling me the story of his new Starlink, which will hopefully allow us to start recording, really good video and audio again. Not that that you folks get to not see good video and audio because of, as we've mentioned, how it's recorded, but we have a delay, of course. I have a delay mainly because of my brain. John, that's all technology. But we started with that, but we're also talking about, we had a lot of really good conversations before we even hit record. Folks, you should have been here for it.
Yeah, they're actually much better. when we
the conversations usually are much better.
And then we hit record and we go like this. Staring into space if you're listening.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Gotta like it.
We're always staring into space. That's pretty common for us.
I know it is. We were, though, talking a little bit about EVs, and you had a really interesting point that a lot of people might not think of, and I didn't, when you're talking about your Jeep, the E. Tell me again what it's called. It's the E something.
4xe.
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 And it's in terms of oil changes, because as we said, dealers, auto dealers are having they're having to reinvent themselves a little bit, especially when it comes to maintenance, because normally with an ICE vehicle, internal combustion engine, we talked about the old days when dudes would change the oil every 2,000 or 3,000 miles. And, that's how I know my cars are going to last forever and blah, blah, blah. Well, as it turned out, viscosity doesn't break down for till much later for most of those oils. They've really improved in quality and so on. But with your 4xe, you run it on strictly electric power from time to time. And
a lot of the time.
Okay, a lot of the time is fair. And so it does not run the actual gas motor in the vehicle. So talk about that, because the 10,000 mile interval for your engine.
Yeah. Well, so let me put it into a little bit of context for you folks, because John and I had a lot of back conversation. I'm about to take my wife's car to get an oil change, and she does not have a hybrid. It's a regular ICE engine, and she's a little bit over her oil change, her suggested oil change, which both John and I agree that's just an arbitrary number, because the car's fine. There's nothing wrong with it, and she's not that far over. Because a lot of dealers have convinced us and convinced themselves that they need to have the oil changed every, 4,500 miles? Yep. When in reality, a lot of cars last a lot longer. And it's not just the oil. Oil's a part of that, but it's also the engines. The engines are much more efficient, and they don't burn oil as much as they used to, and they utilize what they have quite a bit more. So they can go a lot further. So that led me to my story about my last oil change. So I'm leasing my Jeep, as many of you know, and with Jeep, they give you 3 oil changes with your lease. Well, with my mileage on my lease, I should only have to use those 3 oil changes, which so far I'm doing that before my lease ends. So I never have to pay for an oil change, it's a great perk. My oil change interval, according to the system and the book, is 10,000 gas motor miles. But as I've mentioned before, I have an electric motor in there, several electric motors, but I can run on full electric whenever I want to. So when I'm just tooling around town, when I'm going in my general neighborhood, I've got 25 miles. I rarely, unless I'm doing a lot of running around, I rarely ever use my gas. It's almost always electric. I just hit the button, I'm full electric, and I tool around town. By the time I get home, I'll be rolling in with another mile left. Charge it up and go and do it again. So I really don't use that many gas miles unless I hit the freeway, or I go a long distance, a lot longer than that 25 mile mark, like if I'm going to the airport or something. So then I'll obviously use gas miles. So the internal system, which is tied to an app, so I can look at it and it'll tell me my oil health, only tracks motor miles. So in reality, when I got my first oil change, I was already at 13 or 14,000 miles before my 10,000 mile oil change was expected. And so I got my oil changed. And then the interesting thing was, when I went to the dealer to get my oil changed, everything was great. They put the little sticker up in the window and it said, your next oil change is due in 4,500 miles. Like, no, it's not. It's 10, 10 motor miles. So
awesome.
I just find that very interesting that they're still sticking to that. And John made a very astute comment. And it's something that I thought we should talk about because we are still car guys. I mean, I know we haven't really talked about it much, but that's the business we're in. John made the statement that dealers need to really start looking from a fixed ops standpoint, from a service and repair standpoint, look at how their operations run, because they're still depending on hopefully tricking someone into thinking they need to get their oil changed every 4,500 miles. And I'm saying it pretty bluntly and meanly, but that's not necessarily the case. So what are some other tips and tricks a dealer might be able to do to increase their service ROs in their service department? John?
Yeah, well, we might view it as trickery, but I think the dealers are, look, they're just trying to encourage people to keep coming back and to utilize them for their maintenance work. Because let's face it, if it's just oil changes that you visit dealers for, there's a lot of competition. You know, there are the Jiffy Lubes and the Firestones and the, you name them. They're everywhere these days, and that's fine. But what dealers are more concerned about, I think, is the new prevalence of EVs, and not because it's a big thing now, because it's not. It's still, no matter what the government wants you to believe, it's still a tiny percentage of the overall vehicle production, and certainly the vehicle volume in general that's out there is a tiny percentage. Not that that's good or bad. We're not commenting on that today, although we have in the past. What I'll say though is that if you look toward the future, and you need to as a dealer, you need to be looking for what are some things that you can do with EVs. One example is tires. In fact, they are traditionally EVs are harder on tires than an ICE vehicle, and that's often because of the weight. That has something to do with it, but they're hypersensitive then to inflation levels. So if you don't inflate them and keep them inflated the way they need to be, then you're going to have undue wear on the tires, and of course rotate and balance and things like that. So that's one of the things. Brakes are another thing very important to look at for EVs. And again, and our main point in bringing that up is not to say, hey, dealers, if you're listening, and you might be, then you need to look at some ways to, and it's for all of us in any business setting. If you're not looking to the future, you're going to be left behind. Especially in the days of AI and technology, the level it is, you really need to, and it's a lot easier said than done. You need to think toward the future and what it brings, not just 10 years down the road, but even 30 years down the road. And then how do what you do in the next 5 years feed that 30, and learning along the way. It's really a different mindset than we used to have, I think. Just in business in general. So it makes it kind of interesting, but it's a big part of it is learning how to scope into the future and say, this is what I see coming down the road. You may be right or wrong. Things can change dramatically based on infrastructure, as we're seeing with charging in California, for example, charging EVs. But it can also change by government regulation. So things, boom, overnight can be made completely different than what you anticipated. So it's just kind of fun to think about what goes on. So avail yourself to experts and don't be afraid to ask questions.
And that's a key. And another area, I think, and it brings me back to this Jeep dealer, because, different experience with the tag and everything. Those are the guys in the back putting the work in.
Yep.
I spend a lot of my time consulting with dealers on the sales side, on the front end. And we talk a lot about what separates you from everyone else. And a lot of what we're focusing on now, because of our culture, because of the nature of business in general, is the customer experience. How are you going to stand out? If your prices are exactly the same, and this goes into service too. If your prices are exactly the same as Jiffy Lube, what sets you apart? It's your customer service. It's the fact that Jiffy Lube doesn't rotate tires. You made a great point there. They don't do brakes. They don't do any of the other maintenance. They just change oil. we shouldn't be so dependent on that, and we need to focus on customer experience. And that was the one thing at that dealership that I was so happy with. And I don't consult with this dealership, but I go to one specific person. Every time I make an appointment, it's with him. His name is Jonathan. He's a great guy. Jonathan focuses on customer experience. And that's why I keep going to him, is because while I don't agree, and has to do with the tire thing we've talked about before, with the I don't agree with how they think about that and what they say.
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan is willing enough, though, to hear me complain about it and talk to me and actually try to solve problems. Even though he hasn't been able to, the fact that he's willing to try is enough for me. And that's going to be enough for customers as well. So that's a really big point. But I love what you're talking about specifically with EVs. I can use it as an example because I have firsthand knowledge. My Jeep actually has different tires on it than any of the other regular Wranglers, and they are the same tires that you'd find on a 2500 or a 3500 size truck, because it's so much heavier than all of the other Wranglers. So it does, they do, and they are wearing out faster than I would have expected them to.
Well, considering the way you drive, you do a lot of off-roading and then racing. I know you race with a lot of
racing. I squawk the tires right and left. No, but the vehicles are a lot heavier, so it makes a lot of difference. But it also, so thinking outside the box, that brings me to another situation I had recently, conversation I had rather, with a dealer in Texas. And he's in a smallish town. It's not like, it's over, I think, 30,000 people. So it's not a tiny town, but it's not big by any means. It's not a metropolis. And this particular dealer sells EVs. And he's got several in the lot, and his concern is that he's not moving them. Well, I said, let me ask you this. Let me start with you. Do you have a charger on the lot? He's like, yeah, but it's kind of old. Do you advertise it? No. Okay. Are there any other chargers in town? No. So why don't you think about this? And this has nothing to do with, the conversation we're having with the dealer, or dealership, but think about this as another business opportunity. Look into investing in 3 or 4 charging stations that you can actually charge money. I've done this before. I've gone to a place where they give you the first hour for free, and it's like 30 cents a minute afterwards. I go and charge for 2 hours. It costs me $8 or $9. It's not a lot of money for me, but if you're doing that constantly with people, you're going to make your money back on the investment. Why don't you look at that? Get some level 2 chargers that you can charge people and advertise the hell out of it. You've got the space, and no one else in town's doing it. And now people are coming to your lot. And people will buy from you because you're giving them a good experience.
That's the other part, is that you can even if you want, you can have special times or whatever where it's free, or where it's, a reduced rate or whatever, because it's really becomes an advertising expense, that, if somebody, instead of charging them $9, you just say, if you refer somebody or whatever, you get some special, a card that gives you time on the charger or whatever. But
exactly,
but that's something like that can be, you're right. Without it, you've got nothing. And if nobody else has chargers in town, well, it's no wonder you're not selling any EVs, number one, but right. Number two, maybe other people who do have them, instead of going to a nearby city or wherever they're located, would get it done closer to home and stop by and get some coffee and donuts, or get, whatever,
exactly,
while they're there. But yeah, it puts you in a favorable light. That's a great point.
And you could even take it a step further. Your lot's a great idea. That's where you should start. But that doesn't mean it's like a vending machine. You could put them anywhere. You could go to a business and say, hey, let me partner with you and I'll split the profits. I'll pay for the investment. So I get 60 or 70% and you get the rest.
Yeah.
Why not?
Good thought. And so what do you have any idea what the investment would be for a level 2? I have none whatsoever, but
I heard once, but I don't know if it's still the case, that they're about $100,000.
Okay.
For an actual level 2 that has all of the technology in it to allow you to charge and not charge when I mean charge your credit card.
Yeah. So, and I'm wondering,
cheap, but
I'm wondering, initial investment, but I'm wondering, what ongoing investment is, because obviously it's using off the grid
It's using,
such,
right.
quite a bit of power.
Well,
I don't know what that would come to on a monthly basis.
and that's a great question too, because I think part of that $100,000 was, and I'm not looking at the charger. I don't think the charger itself costs that. I think it's the installation and bringing the power lines to it and all that stuff. So I think that's why that investment is so expensive. So if you're going to do a charge bank, if one costs you $100,000, a charge bank of 2 or 3 might cost you $125,000. So it's not exponent. It's not 100,000 per charge bank.
Yeah, makes sense. That makes sense.
So,
well, I
don't know. I don't know the prices for that, and I bet you it depends on your community too. This particular community has its own power grid with wind power.
Okay,
so they could be cheaper,
or not,
or more expensive. Yeah, it just depends.
It does depend. It's funny, and we've had these conversations about alternative energy and so on, and they're all options. Of course, all these things are options. I've heard funny or seen some relatively funny memes or challenges for that if you drive an EV, then you should only be able to use alternative energy to charge it, which would never work.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting thought because look, if you're anyone who says I'm cleaner because I'm driving an EV doesn't really understand that 80+% of the EV chargers are powered on the grid, which is 80% non-alternative energy.
Yeah.
So anyway, look, I think it's a viable thing, and it's something we should have talked about years ago. I'm glad that EVs are becoming attractive to a certain percentage of the population. I'm not happy that the government is putting its thumb on the scale, trying to force
anytime
and companies, corporations, look at Cadillac, forcing them to get into an all EV mindset, and they will not last if they do that. So
no, because the demand isn't going to meet the supply.
Even if it did, the ability to charge them is not going to. It just is not viable. It's just not.
No, unless, which now I'm giving way too much credit to someone or something that I shouldn't give this much credit to. See, here's me going political. You see my dog behind me?
Yes, I do.
Anyway, maybe their grand master plan is to get so many EVs on the road that's gonna challenge the grid, so then they can look at other alternative power sources that they can dump millions and billions of dollars
do it in
into.
hindsight. That's a great idea. That's a terrific idea. Well, you're going to have to wait, and your car is sitting in the garage, and gosh, it would be great to be able to charge it, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't it?
So we need to spend more money on infrastructure and on so whatever.
So you guys will be now that you have that car, it's not being used. Let's charge you some extra tax dollars, and so we can build this other stuff.
And if you think
it's their master plan,
if you think charging it's one of the many. If you think that the electricity to charge your vehicles is going to be free, and I heard that from many people when they decided to go with an EV. Well, I don't have to pay for gas anymore. Just wait. Just wait. You'll be paying as much.
I will say that my Jeep takes, with my level 1 charger, my Jeep takes about 15 hours to do a full charge, 12 to 15 hours. Mm-hmm. I have not seen an exponential increase in my power usage in the house.
And that's good.
I was concerned about that.
Yeah. So it hasn't been exponential. Has it increased?
Well, yes and no. In the winter, I have not seen an increase more so. Okay. I mean, everything is increased because prices have increased.
Sure.
I didn't see an increase based solely on the old numbers, if that makes sense. Like if nothing had changed, I maybe would have seen an extra $2 or $3 on my bill, but nothing. It wasn't like $50.
Okay, and that's fine. Yeah, $2 or $3. Who cares? My guess is it's about the same as my pool filter and pump.
Probably.
It's
I
probably
would assume
similar
that.
to that, which runs 12 hours a day.
Right. Right.
So whatever. I mean, look, if you can afford to spend it, that's fine. It's just it's the irrational thought, though, that you will be able to get energy however it's generated for free. It just doesn't happen. And yours is a different story. Yours, I think, because it's a hybrid, essentially, it can go both ways. See what I did there? It is a much better call. And it makes the vehicle much more viable because you do not depend on one or the other necessarily.
Right.
I mean, gas, probably so, especially if you're taking a long trip or whatever.
Yep.
But electric on your vehicle it's really a convenience, if you ask me, for you. And I think it works beautifully for that intention.
It does. I think for what it is, for, like I said, tooling around town, or even going off road, especially when I was in the mountains, I'd use the battery up going up the hill, and I would charge it pretty much to full going down the hill. Yeah. So, it's a trade-off. And that's the thing too. So even on long trips though, you say I depend on the gas, and I do. So if I drive on one full tank of gas on flat roads on the freeway, if I start at a full tank and my battery is empty, I can hit recharge, which the engine will recharge it, and drive gas for my full. That's 300 miles is my distance that I can go on a tank of gas. So let's say 300 miles. That will fill my battery up to about 75%.
Okay. So
then I've got more that I can use in my battery.
You can go additional, and that's great. Yeah. Does that negatively impact your fuel economy and the
oh, hell yeah.
motor? Oh, well, I'm curious.
No,
I didn't know
the
that.
motor does not. The motor does not. So if I and I've done this test before, if I hit hybrid, which means it's also using the electric motor and the gas motor, my fuel mileage does not improve.
But charging. No. I was talking about, does it get worse? If you're charging your electric, it does not change your gas mileage?
Nope. It doesn't.
Wow. Okay. So you would be doing that all the time then, I would think.
Yeah, I do. So like whenever I take so what I'll do, like when I take Peyton to school, sometimes I'll do battery all the way down my road till I hit the freeway. Cause I know once I go over 70 on our freeway, because ours is hilly. If I was on a flat freeway, I can use electric, but on ours, my gas motor will kick in on hybrid anyways. So I just hit charge, and I'll charge my battery all the way until I get off the freeway, and then use battery all the way to school, battery back out to the freeway, charge it, battery back to the house.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But do you have to make that change, or does it do it automatically when it's on hybrid?
If it's on hybrid, it'll do it automatically.
Okay.
But sometimes I do it just like, so there's one stretch of freeway that is not really it's a freeway, but it's not an interstate. So the miles per hour is instead of 70, it's 60.
Okay.
So I'll drive 60, and my gas, because it's hilly, will try to kick in, and I usually hit the electric button and just do that electric.
Okay.
Because I know the Jeep can take it.
Sure. And performance-wise, if you're on just electric, is it really fast, like a Tesla, for example, off the line?
Nope.
Okay.
It's not. Because so I shouldn't say
it's a different system. I mean,
it's a different system.
Yep.
It is pretty quick, but there's a very fine line. Even when it's in full electric, if I put the gas pedal to the floor, the gas engine kicks in.
Okay.
So then it's a mixture of the electric engine and the turbo, the 4-cylinder turbo.
Okay.
That's very fast.
Yeah.
This is I would say off the start, and I'm saying that for a reason like that, off the start, this one's probably the fastest Wrangler you can get.
Okay. And certainly the fastest one you've ever owned.
It is the fastest one I've ever owned.
Okay.
Fastest overall, that's a big no, because the 392 will lay waste to everything once it gets going. But the 392 doesn't get off the start as fast.
Okay. All right.
392 is an 8-cylinder.
Is that Hemi. Like a Hemi? Is it a Hemi?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a beautiful machine. I would probably, if I were to go do it, not necessarily, I wouldn't say do it again, but if I didn't have the 4xe option, I would probably do. I'd go the complete opposite. Go to the other end of the spectrum and go with that.
I
With
spend
the
as much
392.
money on gasoline as I possibly can.
Exactly. Let it suck it down. Because those 392s are beautiful, and of course they just like the what is that? My neighbor has one. The Charger.
Yeah.
It has a button that you can either normal exhaust or kick-ass exhaust.
It's a door that opens.
And then it goes
behind the catalytic converter. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. That would be fun. So, but now something like that the Hemi obviously comes in an up level model. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. It's a Rubicon, just like mine.
Rubicon. Okay. So if what is MSRP off the top of your head on that?
It depends. It's a sliding scale, but I've seen it as high as $100,000.
Shit.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. It's the most expensive Wrangler you can get.
Oh my gosh. Well, what's the other end of the sliding scale? 20?
The lowest I've seen.
It goes from 20 to 100. Seats are optional in the 20. Bucket seats are actual buckets.
Exactly.
Okay, sorry.
No, the lowest one I've seen is 75. I did find one for 75, but it had
Which
no
is stripped down. Yeah.
It is stripped down.
That's
stripped down now. Stripped down for a Rubicon.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's really a bare knuckles ride. So that's $75,000.
Let's talk about a stripped down Rubicon. I mean, you still get all the bells and whistles when it comes to your technology, but it's not going to have the front sensors. It's not going to have the camera in the front. The top, you're not going to have freedom tops. You're just going to have a regular top. It could even be a soft top. Probably is a soft top if it's the cheapest. You're not going to have rock rails. And what's another? That's pretty much it. Okay. Those are the things. So you're not going to have leather seats, not going to have the rock rails, and you're going to have a soft top. I think that's about the lowest version of a Rubicon you can get.
No air conditioning. I'm just kidding.
It's a Rubicon.
I'm
so
just joking.
Your dash, your tech is going to be there.
I know.
You're going to have the biggest screen. You're going to have all of that good stuff.
So then you look at the 75 to 100 gap. What's included in the $100,000?
So
the leather seats and diamond studded steering wheel.
Now you're gonna have the leather seats, heated, cooled. You're gonna have all of the safety stuff. So you're gonna have the surround camera, the camera in the front, sensors in the front. You'll probably have a winch because they do come. Some do come with winches.
Sure.
You're gonna have the top that retracts.
Okay.
Because that's the most expensive top you can have.
Got it.
Hard top with the retracting top, and you're probably going to have bigger tires.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and this is on me. I've had a visual or just a sense of what Jeeps are for many, many years. And back in oh my gosh, they for a while were, when Chrysler took over, probably was in that time frame, and then they used Chrysler starters, and it was just it was not an awesome vehicle, and they weren't at the top level of pricing, but just since they've become so desirable, and they have, the prices are not shy. They are not shy about the prices.
No. And so our company, your former company, but the company I work for now, they actually give us discounts because we work with a lot of different OEMs. We get discounts on pretty much everything except for one thing. We get discounts on every Jeep or Chrysler car out there. We get employee pricing except for Wrangler.
Wow.
If that says anything about it. But
it does.
They hold their value too. And I think I've shared this with you. My very first Jeep was, and this was, we bought it in 1996. It was a 97 model, bought it in 1996. And it was 21,000 MSRP.
Okay.
I traded it in 5 years later for 17,000.
That's pretty
strong.
That
had 70,000 miles on it. So if that gives you any idea of how they hold their value.
It does. And I think back to the days when I was working with a dealership group that had Honda, and the Honda salespeople, it was it was sort of like taking numbers, people,
Yeah.
you wanted to, especially it was back in the days of the Prelude, which dates me, but the Prelude was a car that they just could not get enough of. And people would come in and they'd say, yeah, I'm interested in the Prelude. And, oh, great. I've got the chart right here. And what color would you like? Well, I'd kind of like that yellow. Sorry, we don't have any yellows. How about green? Do you have anything else coming in? Blue? All right, well, let me think about it. All right, thanks for stopping. Get to the end of the line.
Yeah.
That's how it was. And they had no idea how to sell cars because they didn't have to. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but yeah, I sort of do. So they were order takers at one time. But the guys who sold them used to buy cars for themselves. And usually it was like an Accord or a Civic. They'd buy cars for their own family and sell them, either lease it. No, they'd buy them and then sell it the next year and usually come out ahead and, 12 to 15,000 miles, and they would actually make money on the deal. So, it's not just Jeeps, but traditionally it was, vehicles like that held their value so well. So I'm glad to see that the Jeeps are still viable and doing well.
Yeah. And it's just a fun vehicle. I think I hate to say anything unnecessarily negative, but with my first two Jeeps which were both the same model, they were TJs, the two doors. I always used to say, I love it. I hated selling them and I hated getting rid of them, but they were not everyday drivers because they would rattle and shake, and they could get very uncomfortable, especially if you're doing long trips and long drives, like I used to do a lot of.
And a two-door vehicle, right? It was a two-door.
It's a two-door. Yep. And
right.
If you're going to have that type of car, you really need to have a second car that's your everyday driver and just keep it for more of a fun car.
Right.
It's not the case anymore. So it's good and it's bad because Jeeps were utility vehicles. They were true utility vehicles. They could get you anywhere and they're fun. And you just, now they're still fun. They're still cool. They still can do everything you want it to do.
Yep.
But now they run so well and so smooth, you can actually drive them as everyday drivers. So like I said, for good or for bad, it's, this is fine. I could do a daily commute in this every day. It's so comfortable. I've done long trips in it. It's so comfortable. Maybe not for the person in the back seat. Just ask Peyton. But I think it's perfectly great. And it's so, it's. I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't know how that will factor into whether or not they're going to hold their value, because I think part of what made them hold their value was the fact that they were tools. More so, they were fun tools, but they were still tools. Now it's becoming like every other car.
It's very much mainstream. There's no doubt, but they're unusual enough that they fill that niche that a lot of people want. And for a while, Hummer was kind of, especially high end, was kind of jumping into that realm a little bit, but again, more mismanagement. In my opinion.
Well, it's not just Hummer though either, and you make a really good point because Hummers were expensive. G-Wagons are supposed to, and I'm doing quotes for those who aren't watching, supposed to be another Jeep. Land Rovers, supposed to be another Jeep.
Yeah.
They were ungodly expensive.
Oh
so
my gosh.
The Jeep was the cheap alternative.
It's
not really an alternative because there was such a base to it, but they were considered the cheap alternative if you couldn't afford one of those. Well, now they're just as expensive, if not more expensive.
Well, the G-Wagon, way more expensive.
Way more expensive.
But that's more of a status symbol than anything else.
Right.
That's just how that was. Hummer, the H3.
You're not taking a G-Wagon off road. I don't care. I don't care who you are.
Well, I guess if you want to, you can. I wouldn't. The Hummer H3, when it first came out, had a $30,000 price level, and that was entry level, 5-cylinder engine, blah blah blah.
Right.
And then, realistically, the H3, the H2, I liked them. The H1, the Hummer, the Alpha was amazing. I mean, it was it was a ridiculously stupid vehicle for the average driver. I mean, the driver and passenger sat 6 feet apart, and there was nothing but a massive console center console in there between you. You know, you could not fit anybody between you because it's console. It was just ridiculous. But you want to talk about being able to off-road. And that was the beauty of those vehicles to me, that they were built first and foremost as an off-road vehicle. H3, not as much. Anyway, but I think they could have done better with that vehicle than they did.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you're referring to too is the same thing I see Jeep going through, but just at a slower pace, because the Jeep was literally designed for the military to go off road. Exactly what the Hummer was built to do.
Yep.
And over time, it's now become more of a mainstream vehicle.
Yes.
Hummer just did it in a much shorter period of time.
Yes, and then mismanaged the whole transition and blah, blah, blah. But we'll get to that some other day. But anyway, and I know Mike is going to be sorry he's not on this with us today, because I know he's drooling because we're talking about Jeeps, but because he's just
if it
an
makes you feel better,
aficionado.
Mike, I was thinking about you the entire time we were talking about it.
Okay, and I'm not. This is why we don't ever pan down. Wow,
Wasn't going that far. Wow.
No, sure you weren't.
Take it the whole other way. It's now become a whole other podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Anyway, yes, so let's hear from you, Mike. Don't be afraid to chime in and do some posts for us. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are and what you have to add, because I know you will. And Bill too, obviously. And anybody else, if you have anything you'd like to add, any of your insight into Jeeps or EVs or whatever we've talked about. Service departments, experiences. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you about that stuff.
Hybrid, or not charging stations.
Plug-in irons.
Where can they go to comment and find past episodes and all that stuff?
Well, I would start at PoddiMouths.com, and that really is a really exciting place to start. And from there, you can obviously hit any of our social networks and let us know what you think. Let us know if you'd like to hear more or less or a different direction, or we could talk about anything, and even stuff we don't know anything about. We're pretty much chatterboxes that create opinions on the fly.
Absolutely. John, it's been fun. It's been a good conversation.
It has been fun.
It has indeed. You, as well as all of the rest of our listeners, viewers, have a wonderful rest of your week, and we look forward to talking to you again next week.
We will. See ya.